Uddhava Kunjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jayo Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Astatara Satasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gora Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Continuing with Uddhava Gita, Canto 11, Chapter 11. I'm going to cover a few verses and then stay with a series of verses for the next few days. If you remember what we heard yesterday, Krishna was speaking, and he was speaking about coming to the stage of pure devotional service, where when one comes to the stage of pure devotional service, two things: mind fixed on Krishna, and one no longer has obligation dutifully to act within the varnashram system. One will, but it's not dutiful because the duty purpose is purification of the mind and the intelligence, etc. One has attained pure devotional service that's no longer an obligation. Then Uddhava asks, this is now reading text 26-27. Sri Uddhava said, "My dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, what type of person do you consider to be a true devotee? And what type of devotional service is approved by great devotees as worthy of being offered to your Lordship?" Two questions. Then glorification. My dear ruler of the universal controllers, O Lord of Vaikuntha and Almighty God of the universe. Now, Uddhava is not a Vrajbasi. He understands the majesty, the Aishvarya feature of Krishna. He also understands, because Krishna sent him to Vrindavan, the exalted nature of the residents of Vrindavan and how they're beyond the stage that he is. So he's looking up to the Brijbasis, and Krishna is the Lord of both, the Brijbasis and the Vaikuntavasis, or the Dwarkavasis, or the Mathuravasis. He's the Lord of all. So Uddhava has this knowledge. And he who has this knowledge, how did he get this knowledge? It was given to him by none other than Krishna himself. And Krishna gives such knowledge in reciprocation with the devotion of the devotee. Because it's not just conceptual or theoretical knowledge, it's realized knowledge. He's a very exalted person. Still, he's asking questions that are appropriate for us, for our benefit. It's not like there's going to be readers of the Bhagavatam later, so we'll ask some questions that'll be good for those readers. He's placed in the position that he's in by Krishna's influence, by the Yogamaya potency of Krishna. He is asking as if he doesn't know. And Krishna is going to give answers. So the two questions: We heard the previous My Pure Devotee has these two qualifications, mind fixed on me, no longer obligation for worldly obligation and duty. They may do, may not do, but there's no obligation because purification has been achieved. So now Uddhava's asking, what do you consider, what type of person do you consider to be a true devotee, a true devotee, true devotee? Sadhu, a saintly person. And those who are such qualified, pure devotees, what type of devotional service is recommended by them? And then the glorification. I am your devotee, and because I love you, I have no other shelter than you, therefore please explain this to me. So the focus then goes to text 28. I'll read 28. Another Uddhava says, my dear Lord, as the absolute truth, you are transcendental to material nature. And like the sky, you are never entangled in any way. Still being controlled by your devotees' love, you accept many different forms, incarnating according to your devotees' desires. And this is another one of those answers to the puzzling question that Queen Kunti asks in her prayers, which is, a Janmashtami question. What's the reason for the Lord's appearance? Queen Kunti puzzles about this in her prayers, chapter 8, canto 1. Some people say this, some people say that. So here's what Uddhava says. Although you're unborn, you're born, and you accept forms specific to, in response to the desire of your devotees. Pure devotees, of course. And that's the reason. They want to see, he comes because they want to see. And they want to see in this particular way, so he comes in this particular way for the devotees. It's a nice topic. There's much to say on that topic. So then, now Krishna is going to respond, and that's the commentary I'm going to be reading this morning. It's a long verse. It's a series, 29, 30, 31, 32. And in the first three of those four, there's 28 qualities. I'll read quickly. 28 qualities of a devotee. Question: where else have we heard about some number of qualities of a devotee? And there's several places. One of those celebrated places is in Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Krishnadas Kaviraj gives a list of 26 qualities of a devotee. By the way, here the list is 28, which is okay. It's just a different model of quality, because devotees' qualities are unlimited. Another is Kapila Dev's discussion with Devahuti, Canto 3, Chapter 25. Much shorter list, but it's qualities of a devotee, because he's describing devotional service to her. Another place is found in 7th Canto, Chapter 11, which is Narada to Yudhisthira, describing the qualities of a human being and then the stage of perfection, similar to what's here. There's another, this is for those that like to get the big picture of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. There's many places, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, many places that these qualities are referenced, and it's nice to know them and to cross-reference them and see what is said here, what is said there, because this is what we're supposed to become. We're supposed to become devotees. And then there's criterion or characteristics of a devotee that we should emulate or try to become like. Another place is the topic is different, but the substance is quite the same. In chapter 13 Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks about what is knowledge. In verses 8 through 12, he gives items of knowledge which are actually qualities or characteristics of one who's situated in Krishna consciousness. And a conclusion here, of all of them, in all of these lists, there's one out of the so many others that's primary, and all the others are secondary. Primary Swarup Lakshana is complete shelter in Krishna. Krishna Eka Sharana. Rupa Goswami has a similar description, by the way. And he says this is the primary, Krishna Eka Sharana. And then anything else follows that one. Therefore, they're secondary. Without the one, the secondary ones don't come, because the secondary ones follow the primary ones. So in this list, it's a nice list, 28. It's qualities of a devotee. And remember the context we discussed yesterday. All the 4.5 chapters leading up to this is knowledge and detachment. Jnana Vairagya. And there's, without shelter in Krishna, it's temporary. It's vidya is knowledge that leads to detachment. In all the Vedas, this same couplet, Jnana Vairagya, is found everywhere. It's revered because the Veda is knowledge, and one who has knowledge becomes detached. Conversely, one who doesn't have knowledge, they're attached. You got to be attached to something. So if you're attached to Sat, then you're detached from the temporary. And if you're not detached from the temporary, you're attached to the temporary, or your knowledge is covered. So without attachment to the lotus feet of Krishna, without the association of devotees and hearing the topics about Krishna, then at best one can come to the impersonal realization, or at least aspire for it. But the complete stage of knowledge is shelter in Krishna, and then it's permanent. So that the final text 32 of this list I'm going to read is the Pure Devotee. So there's Jnana Mishra Bhakti and there's Shuddha Bhakti. In the Shuddha Bhakta, we heard Krishna spoke, just that other verse. No longer the imposition of designations. Sarva Upadi Vinir Muktam. No longer designations, including the designations of Nityasiddha, Nityabadha, or I have knowledge and I don't have knowledge, and therefore I'm in bondage. Gone. There's just the identification with the pure soul, and in bhakti, the pure soul's position as Krishna's eternal servant. Jivair Swarupaya Nitya Krishna Das. So what's in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya's teachings to Rupa and Sanatan, is Srimad Bhagavatam. We'll say it this way. Lord Chaitanya's teachings is the same as Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is the same as Lord Chaitanya's teachings. They're identical. The language is a little different, and even within the Bhagavatam, the language is a little different here, a little different there, which is fine. The principles are unchanging. Shuddha Bhakti is Shuddha Bhakti. And Mishra Bhakti is Mishra Bhakti in their stages. So we've been hearing the role of karma yoga, detached work, the role of Gyan, the role of knowledge, and the role of bhakti. And there's like these verses that I'm just now going to read, there's maybe 50 pages of commentary, which means that they're very important, so we're spending some time. Here's the verse, This is Krishna's response to Uddhava's two questions. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. O Uddhava, a saintly person is. He wants to know the characteristics of a true devotee. So here they are. A saintly person is merciful and never injures others. Even if others are aggressive, he is tolerant and forgiving toward all living entities. His strength and meaning of life come from the truth itself, and he is free from all envy and jealousy, and his mind is equal in material happiness and distress. Thus, he dedicates his time to work for the welfare of all others. His intelligence is never bewildered by material desires, and he has controlled his senses. His behavior is always pleasing, never harsh, and always exemplary. And he is free from possessiveness. Now, all of these qualities have their spiritual counterpart, but this is speaking of the material possessiveness, etc. He never endeavors in ordinary worldly activities, and he strictly controls his eating. He, therefore, always remains peaceful and steady. A saintly person is thoughtful and accepts me as his only shelter. That's the primary characteristic. Accepting Krishna as the Krishna Eka Sharana, or Mam Eka Sharana. Such a person is very cautious in the execution of his duties and is never subject to superficial transformations because he is steadied and noble. Even in distressing situation, he has conquered over the 6 material qualities, namely hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, old age, and death. He is free from all desire for prestige and offers honor to others. He is expert in reviving the Krishna consciousness of others and therefore never cheats anyone. Rather, he is a well-wishing friend to all, being most merciful. Such a saintly person must be considered the most learned of men. He perfectly understands that the ordinary religious duties prescribed by me in various Vedic scriptures possess favorable qualities that purify the performer, and he knows that neglect of such duties constitutes a discrepancy in his own life. Now those are the 28. Then there's the text 32, which is the pure devotee. Having taken complete shelter at my lotus feet, however, a saintly person ultimately renounces such ordinary religious duties and worships me alone. Thus, he is considered to be the best among all living entities. The BBT purport goes through each one of these. There's a publication of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wrote commentary on all the verses of the entire Uddhava Gita, and it's been translated. Very nice book. Recommend our. I've been reading from it regularly. I'll be reading from further commentaries, but it's so many of the commentaries go through each one of the 28, and then give some focus to number 32, 11, 32. So we'll be doing that shortly. To neglect religious duties doesn't mean, for example, because we discussed this yesterday, and we're going to hear some more about it this morning, about Ekadasi, for example. You know, there's the regular and there's the occasional. Nitya, karma, and naimittika karma, or dharma, duties. that are like a classic is Naimatika, is, observing Janmashtami or observing Ekadasi. And there's rules, there's procedures that's recommended in the scriptures. So it doesn't mean, okay, I don't pay attention to, now I'm on this nice liberated platform, I don't observe Krishna Janmashtami. Or it's Ekadasi and I don't observe Ekadasi. I mean, that's not, Nanda Maharaj observed the birth ceremony of Krishna and he observed Ekadasi. And Ambarish Maharaj observed Ekadasi, for a whole vrata for a whole year. So it's not that they neglect them, but they don't do them for the purpose of some kind of, do something to get something. Like in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna wants to leave the battlefield. And Krishna says, you don't have the adhikar, you have to do your duty. Then Arjuna argues, what if I become perfected, then I won't have to do my duty. He said, even if you're perfected and don't have to do your duty, you'll still do because it sets an example for others. Like King Janak didn't have to do duties, he was perfected. But he did, and great souls do, because it sets example. But they no longer have to do for cleansing purposes, for attaining something purposes. So if that's the reason, then what do they do besides for the benefit of others? It's maintaining purity. And purity means to please Krishna. So we observe Krishna, the perfected souls observe Krishna Janmashtami and Ekadasi and all other occasional duties for the pleasure of Krishna. And we do for purification. So now I'm going to read, hopefully, from some commentary on these verses that I just read. (29 through 32). And the commentary I'm going to read from starts with Bhakti Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami's Bhakti Sandarbha, Anuchhed 238. 1. It is good to serve other Vaishnavas when this service is ordered by one's spiritual master, and when it does not create an impediment to the service of one's spiritual master. If one acts otherwise, he's at fault. Sri Narada explains this in the following words, quote, he attains misfortune who worships someone else in the presence of his spiritual master. His worship becomes fruitless, unquote. The qualities of a bona fide spiritual master are described in Srimad Bhagavatam 11.3.21. That's a prior section. It's the Navayogendra speaking to King Nimi. Describes the qualities of a spiritual master. If one's spiritual master does not have these qualities and is envious of advanced devotees, and thus refuses to allow his disciples to honor and worship other devotees, the disciple should leave such a pretender spiritual master, and by so doing is not at fault. He has not disobeyed the teachings of the scriptures. The truth is that such a pretender spiritual master and his disciple both fall into calamity. This is described in the following words of Sri Narada Pancharatra, quote, a spiritual master who speaks wrongly without logic and a disciple who hears wrongly without logic both go to a terrible hell for a long time that seems to not end. Such a spiritual master should be worshipped from afar. If the spiritual master hates Vaishnavas, he should be rejected. This is described in the Smriti, Shastra, doesn't say where. A spiritual master who is materialistic, unaware of what should and should not be done, and deviated from the true spiritual path should be rejected. Next, one who does not have the qualities of a Vaishnava is not a Vaishnava. This is explained in the verse beginning with the words Avaishnavo Pradisthena, quoted in an earlier Anucheda. If the spiritual master does not have the qualities thus described, it is best that one should serve a genuine, exalted Mahabhagavata devotee instead of him. This exalted devotee, who should be equipoised and kind-hearted to his disciple, should be accepted as if he were one's spiritual master. In Sri Hari Bhakti Sudodaya it is said, quote, association is very important. It acts, this is a celebrated verse, it acts just like a crystal stone which will reflect anything which is put before it. Therefore, for his own well-being, an intelligent person will associate with someone who will bring good fortune. This means that without the mercy of a great Vaishnava, one cannot attain the condition where his heart is attracted to the Supreme Lord. Next, therefore, one should appropriately serve all persons who show the signs of being devotees of the Lord. Service to the great devotees is of two kinds. 1, association with devotees. 2, worship and service of the devotee. Association with devotees is described by Lord Krishna in 11th canto, same, Uddhava Gita, the first 2 verses of the next chapter, which is, what we're discussing is a bridge to that section. My dear Uddhava, by associating with my pure devotee, one can destroy one's attachment for all objects of material sense gratification. Such purifying association brings me under the control of my devotee. One may perform the Ashtanga Yoga system, engage in philosophical analysis of the elements of material nature, practice non-violence and other ordinary principles of piety, chant the Vedas, perform penances, take to the renounced order of life, execute sacrificial performances and dig wells, plant trees, and perform other public welfare activities, give in charity, carry out severe vows, worship the demigods, chant confidential mantras, visit holy places, or accept major and minor disciplinary injunctions, but by performing such activities, one does not bring me under control. Next. In the previous chapter, that's this chapter 11, the Lord also explained, text 47, coming up, one who has executed sacrificial performances and pious works for my satisfaction, and who thus worships me with fixed attention, obtains unflinching devotional service unto me. By the excellent quality of his service, such a worshiper obtains realized knowledge of me. Now, how does one attain realized knowledge? Krishna gives it. If Krishna doesn't give it, one doesn't get it. So to whom does Krishna give it? To one who meets all these criterion. Here the word sadhu sevaya means, quote, by a person who has faith in devotional service and who thus knows that all other spiritual paths are improper. And it gives some example of some of these qualities. The Lord describes Ishta in the following words. One may worship me without fire by offering oblations of ghee. The Lord describes purta, in these words, one should work for the construction of flower gardens, fruit gardens, and special areas to celebrate my pastimes. Now, these are indirect activities, different than the hearing and chanting activities. They're recommended activities for devotees, according to one's nature and opportunities for service, etc. Just like, around the temple, the devotees are taking nice care of trees that produce fruits and different things that can be offered to the deities. And that's part of deity seva, it's part of Krishna seva. Thus the Lord explains, quote, one who has executed sacrificial performance and pious works for my satisfaction. So this is varnashram, Daivi varnashram, dedicating your work to Krishna, which is what was said earlier in this section by Krishna. One whose mind is not fully purified yet should dedicate his activities for my pleasure. So these are some of those activities. And one who worships me with fixed attention obtains unflinching devotional service to me. This means that in the association of devotees, one attains faith in confidential devotional service. For example, the Supreme Lord is present in the sacrificial fire, and thus Agnihotra Yagyas are offered to please him. Digging wells, planting gardens, and other like activities these are pious activities. It's part of karma kanda. But can karma kanda activities be dedicated to Krishna's service? Well, it depends on the intention behind the performer. Do you want elevation? Do you want purification? Do you want Krishna's happiness? So those same activities can be done in service to Krishna. Now, commonly people do those things for other purposes, for karma enhancement purposes. That's why they're there, and that's why people do them. It has its place. That's what this message is. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is supremely independent and supremely powerful. It is He who gives the results of all actions. To explain the confidential truth of all this, the Lord Himself declares, again, Uddhava Gita, chapter 11, the same chapter, my dear Uddhava, O beloved of the Yadu dynasty, because you are my servant, well-wisher, and friend, I shall now speak to you the most confidential knowledge. Please hear as I explain these great mysteries to you. Now, Krishna spoke similar words to Arjuna, most confidential knowledge at different places. So who's eligible? The devotee, because of these qualifications. He's eligible to hear, and not only hear, but to understand. Not having yet described that portion of his glories, the Lord proceeds to reveal that confidential knowledge in the passage beginning the next chapter, 11, 12, 1. Here the Lord explains, by associating with my devotees, one brings me under control. Now that's confidential. By performing yoga or Sankhya, one does not bring me under his control in the same way. That is the meaning. The devotees are able to bring the Supreme Personality of Godhead under their control. Therefore, the devotees are not ordinary persons. That is the meaning here. So going back to the verses that we're discussing, 29 through 32. There's devotees. Devotees have these qualities. Their devotee wants to see that Krishna's pleasure is fulfilled, and so they dedicate their daily nitya dharmas and occasional dharmas, like these other things, to Krishna's purpose. And according to the intention behind the performer, Krishna reciprocates. So our intention is very important, and we have to act according to where we are. So Sridhar Swami comments, here the word vratani means ekadasi and other vows. However, of course, this does not mean that other Vaishnava vows are to be neglected. Still, this one vow, the ekadasi vow, brings a very clear result, and thus the regular observance of it should not be avoided. They who are qualified to perform pious deeds are described by the following words in Srimad Bhagavatam 7:14-17. This is Narada to Yudhishthira. Narada to Yudhishthira in the section where he's describing Varnashram system. Varnashram system, dedicating duties to the pleasure of Krishna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is the enjoyer of sacrificial offerings. Yet, although his lordship eats the oblations offered in the fire, my dear king, he is still more satisfied when nice food made of grains and ghee is offered to him through the mouths of qualified brahmanas. The verse preceding this one gives the following explanation. Quote, when one is enriched with wealth and knowledge, which are under his full control, and by means of which he can perform yajna and please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one must perform sacrifices, offering oblations to the fire according to the direction of Shastras. In this way, one should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Continuing, they who are qualified to engage in devotional service are described in these words, 11. So this is a similar topic as 11:29 through 32, because that was the question: who is eligible to make offerings to you? So the same topic is continuing, 11:19. So there may be some repetition here, but there's a reason. It's threadbare being explained to help us. Here's the purpose: to help us who are in the sadhana stage of bhakti go further and further to the Shuddha bhakti stage. That's the purpose. And what's the path look like? Krishna says, worship my devotees is most important. After one is initiated, one must regularly worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One is not able to renounce that worship. In the Skanda Purana, it is said, quote, in the Kali Yuga, one who offers cooked rice to Lord Vishnu and then eats the remnants of that offering obtains the pious results of 6-month fast. So you do this all the time here. You offer rice to the deities, and every day it's 6-month fast benefit. These words do not detract from the importance of observing Ekadasi. One should regularly observe Ekadasi and other Vaishnava vows, for that brings a great result. Now we reveal something about worshiping the Supreme Lord by observing Ekadasi and the other Vaishnava vows. So this is, I think I'm going to halt here. This is Bhakti Sandarbha, and Jiva Goswami is giving us, his reader, a clear picture about if you're aspiring bhakta, you're in the sadhana stage of bhakti, that's all of us. How do you navigate that? What's to be done, what's not to be done, how is it to be done, the things that are to be done, what are things that are not to be neglected. Lots and lots and lots of instruction. So when we're familiar with the territory, we're very clear. how we should conduct ourselves. And then doing so is another thing. The impetus to do so is association with devotees. And in association of devotees, we see good examples. We should be such devotees, being good examples of proper following, and then give teachings that are consistent with the scripture, have behaviors that are consistent with those teachings. And when we receive such association, then we have strength to go from mixed or sadhana stage of bhakti to Shuddha bhakti. But then there's details and details. And that's in what's here in Bhakti Sandarbha. And it seems to be, that's the question, or what's behind the question that Uddhava is asking. What's the characteristic of one who is your devotee? And those that have achieved the stage of elevation, what do they recommend? What type of offerings do they recommend? So here we're getting Jiva Goswami's association to give us those teachings. Now, he didn't just give teachings and did something else. He followed, and he has full realization. He has full realization because Lord Chaitanya bestowed realization. And supposing we have theoretical knowledge and not sufficient realization yet, supposing that's the case. Largely that's the case. We have some knowledge and not full realization. So how does that full realization come? Krishna gives it. If he wants, and to whom does he want? When one shows to Krishna the consistent A and B, the behaviors are being regularly executed, and the intention behind the behaviors is to please him. So then Krishna gives realization. And he gives himself, ultimately, because realization is part of Krishna giving himself. So there's many more pages. I'll have to consider carefully how much of this to go into. I find it meaningful, but maybe it's a little hard just to hear the narration and stay fixed and alert and so forth. Let's see, I'll go through it. Many more pages. 30 more pages. I just read 4. So how much of this we'll go through, let's see. But it's not all Jiva Goswami in Bhakti Sandarbha. There are different acharyas that speak about this conversation, this section of this conversation between Uddhava and Krishna a lot. A lot. Because it's showing that bridge between becoming attached to becoming detached, to becoming attached to Krishna, to having nothing but Krishna as one's object of attachment. And it's a really important topic. How do you say it this way? On the one hand, Bhagavad Gita teaches us we're eternal soul. We're not the body. And then on the other hand, there's lots of conversation about duty and how to deal with the temporary. Because we have a temporary body, we have a temporary mind, and we're in a temporary world. And how do you relate to it? How do you navigate those two things? And if, there's people that say something way over here, and there's people that say something way over there, you squash one and make, work is worship. Or your spirit, everything in the material world doesn't exist. You de-emphasize one and overemphasize the other. What's the Vaishnava picture? How do we navigate our way in towards the standard of pure devotion? And we all have some idea, and we all need to refine that some idea. And that refinement comes from sadhu sangha, which is what the commentaries are doing, taking Krishna's words and expanding and explaining. I find it very valuable and purifying. So let's see how it goes for the next couple of days. Probably diminish the 30 pages and include only a smaller portion. There's 2 flies that are very persistent in landing on my head. My head is a very attractive object for the flies. So if you see me going like this, that's what it is. So let's see if there's some discussion, and we'll carry forward tomorrow. Mataji has something. Can you go back here? For those of you that are online, we're having a little translation session going on.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So Mataji's question is, Uddhava and Krishna were close friends,
Yes.
but why did they not live together? Why were they separated?
Well, why does she say that they were separate? In what way does
They
she?
were not living together. They were not together all the time.
Well, friends sometimes go here and there. Arjuna and Krishna were dear friends, and sometimes Arjuna was with, and sometimes he was not with Krishna. So friends do that sometimes and sometimes. Largely, Uddhava was with Krishna. Just like Balaram, I was thinking about this because of Balaram's appearance day. One can easily say they were constant companions. Constant companions. But sometimes Balaram went to Vrindavan and performed, Rasta dance with the gopis and gave association to Brijbasis. Sometimes, when searching for the Shamantaka jewel, they caught up a Shatadanda outside of Mithila. He didn't have it. Balaram spent 3 years with the king of Mithila, teaching Duryodhana to fight with a club. Krishna's back in Dwarka. They were constant companions, but a principle of relationship is there must be some separation because that enhances love. Not only that separation enhances love, but there must be separation because it enhances love. So the constant companionship between Krishna and Uddhava was not broken by sometimes Uddhava was sent to Vrindavan to carry Krishna's message. Sometimes, Krishna went somewhere and Uddhava wasn't there. There's separation along with meeting in any relationship. Online?
I don't see an online question, but I had a question.
You have a question, okay.
So Maharaj, in this section, the main message is that if one's mind is not purified, then one should dedicate results from work, like to Krishna.
And hear about him.
So my twofold question is, firstly, practically, how do we dedicate the results from work? And secondly, even for doing that, your mind needs to be somewhat purified. So it looks cyclical to me, like.
I'm not sure what you're asking. The first part is clear. Second part's not clear.
So second part is, for example, if I still want to dedicate my results, still my mind needs to be focused on Krishna, or need to have some basic understanding.
The understanding is until you are purified, the mind will be flickering. It's an assumption. It's a given. because of not being entirely attached to Krishna, the mind will be flickering. That is, I'll be thinking about, for example, my family as I'm engaged in work, instead of thinking about these are part and parcels of Krishna, whom I am given charge to look after. One will think in terms of the temporary, the attachment to my family members in different ways. And that was Uddhava's dilemma back in chapter 6. He's a pure devotee, but he's speaking as if he's not, and he has undue attachment to the temporary and how to overcome it. So it's dedication of your activities to Krishna. And it's to be understood, when you're not purified, there's going to be distraction. Still, accepting the principle, let me dedicate and make offerings of the fruits of my activity to Krishna. I mean, let's just take these examples of flower gardens and fruit gardens, fruit tree gardens. Some people do those things because they like agriculture. So, they like agriculture. They like going into, I know some people, they like going in the garden and making organic vegetable garden and making flower garden. They offer the flowers to the deities and so on. They like. So it's a dovetail in bhakti. So same, for anything that where the mind is not pure, there's going to be some affinity for the temporary, along with dedication of the results to Krishna. It's understood. But the power of dedicating the results of activity unto Krishna, that's the purifying agent that gradually withdraws the attachment to the temporary to the position of being attached to the eternal. That's sadhana stage. And then nourish that by hearing. That's the second part. And the first part?
So, like practically, when we say results from work should be dedicated to Krishna, so is it more of like offering the results in terms of like Lakshmi donation?
Well, that's part of it. But even the part that's besides the discretionary funds that I have, I make a donation to the temple, or to sadhus, or to to brahmanas and whatever. Or I go out of my way to engage in food for life, and we distribute prasadam to people because that's something I know is good and I like to do. I know people that do that. They have discretionary funds and they just do food for life on their own. Offer to Krishna and distribute. But aside from the charity disposition, it's just even when you're writing your mortgage payment or your electric bill or your car payment or whatever, this is for Krishna. You're going shopping for boga in your home, just like in the temple, going shopping for boga. It's for Krishna. Now, I'm also going to eat some of those things that are offered, but I'm not. The thought is it's for Krishna. So, same when you're doing your household duties, your everyday duties. This is meant for Krishna, and it's the same activity, but a different consciousness behind that activity. That's cultivated by these two things: offering the results to for Krishna's pleasure, and hearing about him. And that means associating with sadhus. Hearing about him means associating with sadhus. Anything else? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki Jaya.
Maharaj ki.